What's the best way to keep steaks moist? Steak, a generic term for a portion of beef taken from various parts of the animal and may include any number of cuts: hanger steak, flank steak, rib steak, round steak, etc. Not all of them cook exactly the same. But regardless of which cut you choose, you can still produce a moist finished protein. So let's simply focus on cooking it so that the results are moist. So this is how I do it. With steak, my rule of thumb is thicker is better, and cooking of anything begins with selection. About half an hour before you intend to begin cooking, take it from the fridge and allow it to stand until it reaches room temperature. Half an hour is usually enough. Blot the steak with a paper towel to remove surface moisture. Preheat the oven to 400 deg. Select the seasonings you intend to use. I'd leave the garlic out at this stage, and sprinkle both sides of the steak and rub it in. It's okay to sprinkle on additional seasonings just before putting it in the pan, but it's not always necessary. Allow it to rest for 8 to 10 minutes and preheat a cast iron pan on the stove top with about a tsp or 2 of veg oil. Other fry pans will work, but not as well. The pan should be hot enough so that the steak produces a hearty sizzle when it contacts the frying surface, so be sure to push the steak away from you as it enters the pan to avoid burns from any oil spatter. Press down so that it is in full contact with the pan and leave the steak undisturbed. Don't move it, for about 3 to 5 minutes, depending on its thickness. Turn it over and repeat. During this phase, melt a few tablespoons of butter in the pan alongside the steak. Add fresh herbs on top: garlic, rosemary, thyme, whatever you like, and use a large spoon to baste the steak with the melted butter. Place the pan with the steak in the oven and allow it to cook until it reaches the degree of doneness you are trying to achieve. Remove it from the oven, move the steak from the pan to a serving plate and cover with foil. Allow it to rest 5 to 8 minutes. I like to slice steak before serving it to my guests. If you want to do that, slice the steak in strips cross-grain with strips about 3/8 of an inch thick. Start by selecting good steaks. You want steaks that are graded choice or better because they have a good bit of intramuscular fat, which gives the steak moisture and flavor. From there, don't overcook the steak. Even a mid-well steak can be moist if it is cooked with quality meat. Naturally, it won't be as moist as a rare steak, but if rare isn't your bag, there's no point in belaboring that point. So, just don't overcook the steak. A meat thermometer is the best tool to help you achieve your doneness goal. 120 to 130 for rare, 130 to 140 for mid-rare, 140 to 150 for medium, 150 to 155 for mid-well, and no more than 160 for well done. After 160 degrees, you're just wringing moisture out of the meat. Also, pull the steak when it reaches 5 degrees below your target temp, let it rest for 10 minutes and it will continue to cook to your desired temperature. This is called carry-over cooking. Choose something with good marbling and with a good thickness. A steak thinner than an inch is a no-go for me. Do not overcook. I don't care if you like well done. Cook the steak to the very minimum temperature for your desired doneness. Actually, less. A good rule is to remove from heat 5F to 10F below the target temperature. Well done is 160F. Stop cooking the steak at 150F. The temperature of the center will continue to rise 5 to 10F after you take it off the heat. If you take it to 160F, it will be 170F by the time you dig in, and you will be eating shoe leather. Just know that a well-done steak is going to be more dry than a similar or same steak cooked at lesser doneness. It is impossible to avoid this effect. Rest the steak. 10 minutes is usually enough for an individual steak. The preparation of your steak is not done simply because you took it off the heat. Resting is an important part of the process and is not optional unless you cooked the steak sous vide. Getting a good cut of steak, well marbled, like rib eye, will have the greatest effect in that regard. Then don't overcook it, which is tricky if you are cutting into the meat to check doneness rather than using an instant read meat thermometer. That is because the meat you see on the grill is about 2 shades of red darker, more raw, than it will be on your plate. That means you have to be brave, because if you leave it on the grill until it is the way you like it, it will be substantially overcooked when you eat it. Inexperienced cooks tend to feel it is better to err on the side of overcooking because they have an exaggerated fear of the possibility of undercooking meat. With a meat thermometer, very important, I pull off a steak at 120 to 125 F for medium rare.